The words hung in the sterile air, colder and sharper than the antiseptic tang that burned my nostrils. 3 weeks, Mr. Hayes, I'm so sorry. 3 weeks. Not a season, not a month. A countdown. I watched Dr. Matthew's mouth form the words, but the sound seemed to come from a great distance, a muffled echo in a world that had suddenly lost its bearings. My world had been Clara. For 12 years, she was the sun I orbited, the grain in the wood I worked, the quiet hum beneath the noise of my life. Now, my world was shrinking to the size of this hospital room, to the shallow, labored rise and fall of her chest beneath a thin white blanket. Tubes, like pale, invasive vines, snaked from her fragile body to a battalion of beeping, whirring machines that monitored the systematic betrayal of her own blood. Aplastic anemia, they called it. A 1 in a million diagnosis where the bone marrow just stops, gives up. It was a silent internal thief, stealing the life from her cell by cell, leaving a beautiful, hollowed-out shell of the woman I loved. I pressed my palm against the cool glass of her ICU cubicle, a useless gesture of connection. My fingerprints, permanently whirled with the fine dust of cherry and oak from my workshop, left faint smudges on the barrier separating us. She looked so small in that bed, her dark hair, usually a wild cascade of waves, now matted and lifeless against the pillow. That's when I heard it. Hushed voices, just around the corner, near the nurse's station. Look at her chart, Clara Hayes. She looks exactly like that woman, the mechanic from Boise Abbey. The one who came in with that bad burn last year? You're right. Same eyes, same jawline. You think they're related? Has to be? Sisters, maybe? My hand froze against the glass. Sisters? The word was a foreign object, a stone thrown into the placid lake of my memory. Clara didn't have a sister. She didn't have anyone. Her parents, she'd told me 1,000 times, had died in a fiery car crash on a rain-slicked highway when she was 23. She was an only child, cast adrift, a narrative she'd woven so seamlessly into the fabric of our lives that to question it would be like questioning gravity. I had held her through countless nightmares about that crash, her body trembling in my arms as she relived the horror of being utterly alone. But as those whispers floated down the corridor of Providence St. Vincent, everything I thought I knew about my wife, my Clara, began to unravel. I am Ethan Hayes. I'm 38 years old. I make custom furniture in a dusty workshop in Portland, Oregon. I have sawdust in the turnips of my jeans and varnish under my fingernails. My life is simple, built on the solid, reliable truths of wood, joinery, and love. And my wife is dying from a disease whose only cure is a bone marrow transplant from a close relative. A relative she supposedly didn't have. My world tilted on its axis. The rhythmic, metronomic beep of Clara's heart monitor suddenly sounded like a ticking clock, counting down not just her life, but the life I thought we had. My fingers found the silver chain around my neck, where I kept my wedding ring while I worked. I twisted it, the metal biting into my skin, the faint pain a grounding sensation in the dizzying freefall of my thoughts. I had to know. My feet moved before my mind gave the command, carrying me toward the nurse's station. One was older, with steel gray hair pulled back in a tight, no-nonsense bun. The other was younger, maybe 30, with a blonde ponytail and a kind, open face. "Excuse me," I said, my voice sounding rough and unfamiliar, like a tool left out in the rain. I couldn't help but overhear. "You were talking about my wife, Clara Hayes." I swallowed hard. "You mentioned someone, Abby, from Boise?" They exchanged that look. The one medical professionals have perfected, a practiced blend of pity and professional distance. "Sir, we really can't discuss other patients," the older one said, her tone gentle but firm. "Please," I begged, the desperation in my voice raw and undisguised. "My wife is dying. The doctors said her only hope is a transplant from a family member. If there is anyone—" The younger nurse's expression softened. The older one shot her a warning glance, but the seed was already planted. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes," the young nurse said, her eyes full of genuine sympathy. "I can't give you any specific information. But if I were looking for someone from Boise with the last name Reed, I might start with social media. Reed, not Hayes, not even Taylor, the maiden name on our marriage license. A new name, a new history." The older nurse ushered her colleague away, leaving me standing alone in the hallway, clutching that name like it was a life raft in an open, raging sea. My world wasn't just tilting anymore. It had shattered. I didn't go home that night. The thought of being in our house, surrounded by the physical evidence of our life together, the rocking chair I built for her when she was pregnant with the child we lost, The bookshelves overflowing with her favorite novels. The garden she'd so lovingly planted just beginning to show the first blush of spring was unbearable. Each object was a testament to a life I now realized might be built on a foundation of lies. Instead, I sat in the cab of my pickup truck in the vast, echoing hospital parking garage. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sickly yellow pallor on everything. I balanced my laptop on the steering wheel, the glow of the screen a stark blue in the darkness, and typed the words that felt like a betrayal. Abby Reed, Boise, Idaho. It didn't take long. Social media is a relentless archaeologist of buried lives. There she was, a Facebook profile. The resemblance was stunning, a gut punch that knocked the wind out of me. It was Clara's face, but weathered, sharper. The same heart-shaped jawline, the same sweep of dark eyebrows, the same slightly crooked smile that had captivated me at a friend's barbecue 15 years ago. But where Clara's hair was a soft dark brown, Abby's was streaked with lighter highlights and pulled back in a practical, messy ponytail. Her profile picture showed her leaning against the grill of a vintage pickup truck, a wrench in her hand, a smudge of grease on her cheek, and a defiant spark in her eyes. Clara's eyes. Her profile was mostly private, but a few details were public. She worked at an auto repair shop called Reed's Garage. There were pictures of her with a large German shepherd, a group of friends at a noisy-looking bar, her arms slung casually around a woman's shoulders. She looked strong, independent, real. She looked like someone who could survive. I dug deeper, falling down a rabbit hole of public records, county archives, and online newspaper databases. My hands trembled as I typed, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. And then I found it, an obituary from the Idaho Statesman, dated 15 years ago. Michael and Susan Reed, beloved parents and community members, were killed in a tragic automobile accident on Highway 21. They are survived by their two loving daughters, Caroline, 23, and Abigail, 21. Caroline, not Clara. My breath hitched. My wife had changed her name. She had erased her sister. She had lied to me, not with a single, simple lie, but with a vast and intricate architecture of deceit that had spanned our entire relationship. I leaned my head back against the seat, the cheap upholstery rough against my skin. A flashback, sharp and vivid, cut through the haze of my shock. It was our third date. We were walking along the Willamette River, the lights of the city glittering on the water. "It must have been so hard," I'd said, holding her hand. "Losing your parents like that, being all alone." She'd looked out at the water, her profile etched against the twilight. "The hardest part," she'd whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "is knowing there's no one else in the world who shares your blood, your history. You're the last one. A story that ends with you." I had pulled her into my arms, promising her she would never be alone again. Now, that memory was tainted, twisted into something ugly. It wasn't a confession of loneliness. It was a performance. Ali. I barely slept, dozing fitfully in the driver's seat. By morning, my back was screaming in protest, and my mind was a battlefield of grief and anger. But amidst the wreckage, a single, clear purpose emerged. I had to go to Boise. I called my assistant, Marco, told him a family emergency had come up and he'd have to handle the workshop for a few days. "Everything okay, boss?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "No," I answered honestly, the word a lead weight in my mouth. "But I'm hoping it will be." I showered in the hospital locker room, the hot water doing little to wash away the grime of the last 24 hours. I changed into clean clothes from my overnight bag and went to see Clara before I left. She was awake, a rare occurrence these days. The disease and the punishing treatments had left her perpetually exhausted. "Hey, beautiful," I said, forcing a smile as I took her hand. It felt impossibly fragile in mine. "Hey, yourself," she whispered, her voice a reedy rasp. "You look terrible." I managed a small laugh. "Look who's talking." Her own attempt at a laugh dissolved into a weak cough. When it subsided, her eyes, still the same vivid blue I'd fallen in love with, fixed on mine. They were clear, lucid, and filled with a terrifying resolve. "Ethan," she said, her grip tightening slightly, "I need you to promise me something. Anything. Let me go." The words were quiet, but they landed like a physical blow. "The treatment isn't working. We both know it. I'm tired of fighting. I've made my peace with it." "No," I said, shaking my head of visceral denial. "Don't say that. I haven't made my peace with it, and I'm not going to." She didn't have the strength to argue. She just watched me, her gaze filled with a profound, weary sadness, before her eyelids fluttered and closed. I leaned down and kissed her forehead. It was cool and clammy. "I'll be back soon," I whispered against her skin, a vow to her and to myself. "And I'm bringing help." I walked out of the hospital, got in my truck, and started driving east, toward the rising sun and a woman named Abby Reed. I wasn't just searching for a donor anymore. I was searching for the truth of the woman I had married. The 5-hour drive to Boise was a blur of highway hypnosis. The lush, green landscape of Oregon gradually gave way to the high desert plains of Idaho, the sky a vast, indifferent blue. Spring was in full bloom, the roadsides splashed with wildflowers, but I saw none of it. All I saw was Clara's pale face. All I heard was the echo of her lies. Halfway there, my phone rang, shattering the silence. The caller ID read Providence Hospital. My heart leaped into my throat. It was Dr. Matthews. "Mr. Hayes, I'm calling about Clara." "What happened? Is she—" "She had a seizure," he said, his voice grave. "We've stabilized her, but her condition has deteriorated. The disease is progressing faster than we anticipated." I pulled over onto the gravel shoulder, my hands shaking too badly to grip the wheel. Cars sped past, each one a self-contained world where a wife wasn't dying by the hour. "How long?" I asked, the words catching in my throat. There was a pause. "Days, Mr. Hayes, not weeks." "I'm so sorry." "Days." The word hammered into me, not even the 3 weeks we'd been promised. The fragile hope I'd been nursing felt like it was being extinguished. I thanked him mechanically, hung up, and then called Clara's hospital room. A nurse answered. "It's her husband," I said. "Can I speak with her?" There was a rustling, then Clara's voice, so faint I could barely hear it. "Ethan, where are you?" The carefully constructed walls I'd built around my anger crumbled. "I'm on my way to find your sister," I said, the words flat and cold. Silence. Then a broken whisper. "How? How did you know?" "Does it matter? Why, Clara? All these years, why did you lie to me?" "I was ashamed," she breathed, the words tumbling out in a rush of desperate confession, "of what I did to her. After our parents died, there was money, insurance, savings. I took it all. I told her she was too irresponsible, that I'd keep it for her. Then I just left. Changed my name, started over. She needed me, and I abandoned her." I closed my eyes, the betrayal, a fresh, gaping wound. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I'm dying, Ethan." Her voice broke on a sob. "And I don't want to die with this lie between us. Find her. Please. Tell her I'm sorry. Even if she can't help me, I need her to know." I promised I would, my own anger eclipsed by the raw agony in her voice. I got back on the road, driving faster now, the urgency of physical weight pressing down on the accelerator. Reed's garage was on the outskirts of Boise, a large corrugated metal building with a gravel parking lot. I parked and sat for a moment, trying to calm my racing heart. What was I going to say? "Hi, your long-lost sister who stole from you and abandoned you is dying and needs you to save her?" The garage doors were rolled up, revealing 2 car lifts. Country music drifted out, a strange, upbeat soundtrack to the drama about to unfold. I walked in, the smell of oil, rubber, and hot metal hitting me like a wall. "Help you?" a voice called from beneath a jacked-up Chevy. "I'm looking for Abby Reed," I said. A pair of legs in blue coveralls slid out, followed by the rest of a woman. She sat up, wiping her calloused hands on a red rag. It was her, the woman from the photos, Sophie's sister. In person, the resemblance was even more striking, but she carried herself with a tough, grounded confidence Clara had never possessed. "That's me," she said, standing up. She was tall, with the same slender build as Clara, but her shoulders were broader, her stance more solid. "Car trouble?" "No," I said, my voice catching. I cleared my throat. "My name is Ethan Hayes. I'm Caroline's husband." The change was instantaneous and absolute. Her face hardened, her body tensed, and her eyes, Clara's eyes, turned to ice. "Get out. Please, just hear me out." I said, "Get out," she repeated, her voice low and dangerous. She threw the rag onto a workbench and turned away, heading for a small door marked "Office." I followed her, my desperation overriding my fear. "Abby, please, your sister is dying." She stopped dead but didn't turn around. "That's not my problem." End of. "She needs a bone marrow transplant," I pressed on, my voice rising. It has to come from family. You're her only hope. Now she did turn, her face a mask of fury and pain. Family? Is that what she told you we are? After 15 years of silence? That's rich coming from her. She didn't tell me anything about you, I admitted, the confession costing me a piece of my pride. I only found out you existed yesterday. And that seemed to catch her off guard, a flicker of surprise in her cold eyes. What? Standing there in the middle of the garage, with a country song about heartbreak playing softly in the background, I told her everything. About overhearing the nurses, about my late-night research, about Clara's lies. So she just erased me, Abby said when I'd finished, the words laced with a bitter, hollow laugh. Typical Caroline. Always rewriting history to suit herself. Ugh. What happened between you two? I asked, needing to understand. She stared at me for a long moment, her eyes searching my face. Then she nodded toward the office. Not here. The office was small and cluttered. The desk overflowed with invoices and parts catalogs, the walls covered in calendars featuring classic cars. Abby closed the door behind us, shutting out the noise of the garage, and leaned against the desk, crossing her arms over her chest. It was a defensive posture, a wall she'd clearly spent 15 years building. Our parents died when I was 21, she began, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. Drunk driver hit them head on. We handled it differently. I fell apart, started drinking too much, dropped out of college. I was a mess. She paused, her gaze fixed on something beyond the grimy window. Caroline, she became super daughter. She organized the funeral, dealt with the lawyers, handled everything while I was too wasted to even function. There was an inheritance, she continued, her voice hardening, about $200,000 from insurance and their savings. It should have been split between us. But Caroline decided I was too irresponsible. She said she'd hold on to my share, give it to me when I got my act together. Then, one day, she was just gone. Changed her number, moved away. By the time I finally got sober and tracked her down, she told me the money was gone, spent. My own house. The down payment we had made, I felt sick. The Sophie I knew, the one who was so careful with money, who agonized over every big purchase, that image was fracturing, replaced by a stranger. The last time I saw her was 10 years ago, Abby said, the pain in her voice now raw and undisguised. I drove to Portland, showed up at the hospital where she worked. She took one look at me and told me I shouldn't be there, like I was some disease she might catch. I left. I never tried again. I believed her, but I also believed in the Clara. I knew her gentleness with her pediatric patients, her genuine compassion. Both versions seemed true, and I couldn't reconcile them. I'm sorry, I said, the words feeling pitifully inadequate. For what it's worth, I had no idea about any of this. Yeah, well, Caroline was always good at keeping secrets. Abby pushed away from the desk. You've got your story now. I'm sorry she's sick, I truly am. But I can't help you. Wait. My hand trembled as I pulled out my phone. I scrolled to a recent photo I'd taken of Clara, in the hospital, her face pale and drawn, a shadow of her former self. Just look at her, please. Reluctantly, she took the phone. I watched as her expression shifted. The hard mask of anger cracked, giving way to shock, then dismay. Her defenses were finally, truly breached by the undeniable reality of her sister's mortality. Jesus, she whispered, her voice barely audible. She looks so... She's dying, Abby, I said again, pressing the advantage. Days, maybe less. Whatever she did to you, and I'm not excusing it, do you really want her last days to be like this? Can you live with that? She handed back the phone, her hand trembling slightly. I need to think. We don't have time. I need to think, she snapped, then more quietly. Where are you staying? I don't know. I just drove straight here. She sighed, a long, weary sound of resignation. There's a motel down the road, the Riverbend Inn. Get a room. I'll call you. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. I wrote down my number and left, the sound of a wrench clattering against a concrete floor following me out. Back in my truck, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Clara. Did you find her? I called her. Her voice was weaker than before. I found her, I said. Is she coming? The hope in her voice was a knife in my heart. I don't know yet, she's thinking. There was a long pause. She told me about the money, Clara. And a sob crackled over the line. Ethan, there's something else. The money, it's in a trust, all of it. The original 100,000 plus interest. I never spent a penny. I couldn't. It was never mine to spend. The paperwork is in the safe at home. The combination is our anniversary. This new revelation blindsided me. Another lie. But this one was built on guilt, not greed. Why, Clara? Why didn't you tell her? Why didn't you tell me? Pride, she whispered. Stupid, stupid pride. I was too ashamed to admit what I'd done. Then too much time passed, and it seemed impossible to fix. I closed my eyes, trying to process yet another layer of this complicated tragedy. I'll tell her, I said. Get some rest. My phone rang again almost immediately after I hung up. It was Abby. Is it true? She demanded without preamble. About a trust fund? How did you? Caroline just called me. Could barely understand her, she sounded so out of it. She told me about the money. Is it a trick? Is she just trying to get me to help? I just found out myself, I admitted. But yes, I believe it's true. She said the paperwork is in our safe. Abby was quiet for a long moment. She also said she has days, not weeks. Is that true too? Yes. Another silence, longer this time. Then a heavy sigh. Okay, I'll do it. The testing, the university hospital here can do it, right? Relief, so powerful it almost buckled my knees, flooded through me. Yes. I'll make the arrangements right now. Thank you, Abby. Don't thank me yet, she said, her voice tight with an emotion I couldn't quite place. I'm not doing this for her. I'm doing it because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try. I understand. No, you don't, she said bluntly, but I guess you're starting to. The next morning, we met at the university hospital. Abby arrived in the same grease-stained coveralls, her hair pulled back, her face pale and drawn. She looked like she hadn't slept either. The initial blood tests were quick, and the doctor was optimistic. The fact that you're full siblings gives us a 25% chance of a perfect match, he explained. But even a partial match can be enough. We should have preliminary results in a few hours. Oh. While we waited, we sat in the hospital cafeteria, picking at sandwiches that tasted like cardboard. Tell me about her, Abby said suddenly, staring into her coffee. The Caroline you know. And so I did. I told her about Clara's quiet, wicked sense of humor, about how she worked in pediatric oncology and came home some nights completely wrecked, but never once considered quitting. I told her how Clara couldn't sing to save her life but did so loudly in the shower every morning. I told her about the stray cat she'd rescued from a storm drain, how she'd sat in the rain for an hour coaxing it out. A ghost of a smile touched Abby's lips. We used to call her Bulldog Blake as kids. Once she got her teeth into something, she wouldn't let go. It was the first time she'd spoken of their shared past without bitterness. In that sterile cafeteria, over bad coffee, a fragile bridge was being built between two strangers, connected by the woman they both loved and resented in their own ways. 3 hours later, the doctor called us back. We have the preliminary results, he said, looking at a chart. Miss Reed, you are a potential match. The full compatibility test would take another 24 hours. If she was a match, the donation process would begin. A series of injections to stimulate stem cell production, which would take 5 days. 5 days. I thought about Dr. Matthews' warning. Days, not weeks. Will she make it? Abby asked. Her gaze locked on mine, as if I had the answer. I don't know, I answered honestly. The next day, the detailed results came back. Not a perfect match, but close enough, viable. The medical team in Boise, coordinating with Dr. Matthews in Portland, immediately started Abby on the injections. The side effects hit her hard and fast. She described the bone pain as a deep, relentless ache, a fire in her marrow. She suffered splitting headaches and waves of nausea, but she refused to complain. Clara's going through worse, she'd say through gritted teeth when I'd ask if she was okay. This is nothing. I called Dr. Matthews for an update. The news was grim. She's fighting, Ethan, but the infection is getting worse. We've moved her to the ICU. Her immune system is essentially non-existent now. Her organs are beginning to fail. Will she make it until the transplant? A pause that stretched for an eternity. We're doing everything we can. Not a yes. I relayed the news to Abby, who was lying on her motel bed with a heating pad pressed against her back. Her face tightened with a fierce determination. Can they speed this up? The donation? The doctors were reluctant. A shorter injection period meant a lower cell count, a riskier transplant. But faced with the alternative, Clara not surviving long enough for any transplant at all, they agreed. They would harvest Abby's stem cells after 3 days of injections instead of 5. Those 3 days were the longest of my life. I watched Abby grow weaker, paler, yet more resolute with each passing hour. I was in constant contact with the nurses in Portland. Clara was holding on, but just barely. On the morning of the donation, Abby could hardly walk. The nurse who came to our motel offered a wheelchair, but she waved it away. "I'll walk," she insisted, her pride as fierce as her sister's. The donation process itself took 6 agonizing hours. Abby lay in a reclining chair, a machine humming beside her, drawing her blood, filtering out the precious life-giving stem cells, and returning the rest to her body. By the end, she was utterly spent, pale and exhausted, but the medical team was satisfied. "We've got a good collection," the lead doctor told us. "It's being processed now and will be on a medical flight to Portland within the hour." "Tell her," Abby said, her voice weak but firm. "Tell her those cells have the Blake family stubbornness built right in. They aren't going anywhere." That evening, we were on the plane. Abby was dozing in the seat next to me, drained but present. She had refused to stay behind. "I've come this far," she'd said. "Might as well see it through." Beside us, in a specialized temperature-controlled container, was our last hope. We were flying into the storm, not away from it, carrying a fragile cargo of life against a ticking clock of death. Dr. Matthews met us at the entrance to St. Joseph's Hospital in Portland. His expression was grave, his face etched with exhaustion. "She's very weak," he warned us before we even asked. "The infection in her lungs has worsened. We've had to intubate her to help her breathe. I must be honest, her condition is critical." My heart, which had been buoyed by the successful harvest, sank like a stone. Beside me, Abby's hand found mine and squeezed. It was a small, instinctive gesture of comfort, the first she'd ever offered. I looked at her, surprised. "She's not done yet," Abby said, her voice quiet, but filled with a conviction that startled me. "Blake women don't give up that easily." We were allowed to see Clara briefly before the transplant began. The sight of her was devastating. She was swollen from medications, a tube taped to her mouth, her life sustained entirely by the machines that breathed for her. She was barely recognizable. Abby stopped dead in the doorway, her face draining of what little color it had left. "Jesus," she whispered. I moved to Clara's side and took her hand. Her eyes, which had been closed, fluttered open. They were hazy with drugs, but they focused on me, and then moved past me to the figure standing in the doorway. I saw the moment she registered Abby. It wasn't a movement, just a faint widening of her eyes, a slight, almost imperceptible quickening of the beep on the heart monitor. "She's here, Clara," I said, stroking her hair back from her damp forehead. "Abby's here. She's your donor. It's happening tonight." And there won. Tears welled in Clara's eyes and traced slow paths down her temples into her hair. She tried to move her hand toward her sister, a pathetic, feeble gesture. Abby hesitated for only a second before moving forward. She took her sister's other hand, her own calloused fingers gently enveloping Clara's fragile ones. "Hey, Caroline," she said softly, using the name no one had spoken in 15 years. "Long time no see." The transplant itself was anticlimactic. Just another clear bag added to the forest of IV poles surrounding the bed. But as I watched the liquid drip, drip, drip down the tube, I felt a surge of irrational hope. Those cells, Abby's cells, full of Blake family stubbornness, were now inside her, an army sent to fight a desperate war. The next few days were a blur of waiting. Abby and I took up a vigil in the ICU waiting room, sleeping in shifts on the uncomfortable vinyl couches, surviving on stale coffee and grim updates from the nurses. On the third day, Clara took a turn for the worse. Her oxygen levels dropped, her kidneys began to fail. Dr. Matthews' face when he came to update us told me everything. "You should prepare yourselves." Abby, who had been dozing, sat bolt upright. "Number, it's too soon. The cells haven't had time to work yet." She stood, swaying slightly, and went to Clara's bedside. She leaned down close to Clara's ear, her voice low and intense. "Listen to me, Caroline Blake. You don't get to do this. You don't get to bring me all the way here just to check out. My stem cells are in there now, and they are just as stubborn as I am. So you fight. You hear me? You fight." For 2 more days, Clara hovered on the precipice. Then, on the morning of the 5th day, post-transplant Dr. Matthews found us in the cafeteria. For the first time, I saw a glimmer of light in his tired eyes. "There's been a change. Her white blood cell count has increased, just slightly, but it's the first time it's moved in the right direction. It suggests the new cells may be engrafting." Abby's fork clattered to her plate. A single, choked sob escaped her. It was the sound of a dam breaking. From that day on, the tide began, almost imperceptibly, to turn. The white blood cell count continued to rise, slowly but steadily. The infection began to respond to the antibiotics. Her kidney function improved. A week later, they removed the breathing tube. Her first unassisted breaths were weak and shallow, but they were her own. When she opened her eyes and her gaze found mine, clear and recognizing, a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying lifted from my chest. "Hey," she whispered hoarsely. "Hey yourself," I said, tears blurring my vision. "Welcome back." Her gaze moved past me to Abby, who stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed. "You stayed," Clara said, her voice a thread of sound. "Someone had to make sure those stubborn cells of mine took hold," Abby replied, her attempt at lightness not quite hiding the emotion in her voice. Clara tried to smile. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Abby said, the familiar phrase now holding a different meaning. "You've still got a long way to go." And it was a long way. Months of recovery, of physical therapy, of fear and uncertainty. Abby stayed. She got a temporary job at a local garage, and when it became clear Clara's recovery would be measured in months, not weeks, she moved into our guest room. They began to talk. Tentatively at first, then with a raw, painful honesty, they sat for hours in the sunroom, unspooling 15 years of hurt, anger, and misunderstanding. 3 months after the transplant, Clara came home. Abby and I had decorated the house with balloons, and as I helped Clara from the car, frail but alive, Abby was there, ready to help her up the steps. That night, after Clara was asleep, Abby and I sat on the porch, the summer air thick with the scent of jasmine and the blinking of fireflies. "My lease is up in Boise next month," Abby said, staring out into the darkness. "There's a garage for sale on the south side of town. With the trust fund money, I was thinking I could make a down payment." "We'd like that," I said, and I meant it. In the crucible of the past few months, this stranger, this ghost from my wife's past, had become family. A week later, Clara was strong enough to join us for dinner at the kitchen table. I opened a bottle of sparkling cider. "To new beginnings," I proposed, raising my glass. "And second chances," Clara added softly, her eyes on her sister. Abby held up her glass, a real small smile on her face. "To family," she said, "complicated as it is." We drank to that. The three of us, bound together by blood, by lies, and by the strange, terrible, beautiful twists of fate that had nearly torn us all apart and then, somehow, brought us home. Nothing was perfect. The trust between us was still fragile, a piece of precious china painstakingly glued back together. But we were here, together, alive, and for now, that was more than enough. It was everything.